Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for standing by. Welcome to the USDA-hosted session implementing the Community Eligibility Provision with Title I and E-Rate conference call. Today's call is being recorded. If you should require assistance during the call, please press star then 0. I would now like to turn the conference over to your host, Kevin Miskornick. Please go ahead, sir.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. We welcome you to today's presentation on how states and local educational agencies can implement the community eligibility provision while participating in the federal Title I E-Rate programs. My name is Kevin Miskornick with the USDA Food and Nutrition Service. This webinar is part of a series that USDA is hosting to promote and assist with CEP implementation for school year 2015-16. Our session this afternoon features speakers representing two other federal agencies, the U.S. Department of Education and the Federal Communications Commission. Our goal is to provide you with an overview of the various guidance documents and other resources that already exist to accommodate your election of CEP while hopefully answering other questions that you may have. Okay. Today's agenda is pretty simple. I'm going to kick things off with a very quick CEP overview and then hand it over to our speakers from ED and FCC. We will, of course, wrap up by answering some of your questions. Please note that we will be taking those questions via the Q&A tab at the top left of your screen. Please feel free to submit a question at any time. However, to ensure that we provide all of our speakers with a chance to present, we will indeed be saving those for the end. Many of you may already be familiar with CEP, but just in case anybody's new, I'll give a very brief refresher on CEP basics. In a nutshell, community eligibility is a meal service option available through the National School Lunch and School Breakfast programs that allow schools, groups of schools, or entire school districts to serve healthy lunches and breakfasts to all of their students free of charge for a period of up to 4 years. For a few decades now, USDA has offered similar options that allow schools to provide universal meal service, but what sets CEP apart is that it completely eliminates the need for household income applications, which can potentially result in big administrative savings for local officials. That said, it also eliminates a data source that education officials have traditionally relied on to identify and provide services to high-poverty students. And so that is why we continue to have these sessions to provide information about how state and local officials can overcome barriers associated with the loss of data and any funding tied to it. We strongly believe that the benefits of CEP far outweigh any growing pains that might be associated with initial implementation. There are 16 million children in this country living in households that struggle to put food on the table, and CEP is one of the best opportunities that we have to provide many of them with nutritious meals. Schools that implement CEP tend to see participation increases in their meal programs and have shared anecdotally many positive stories of success. So we really hope that if you're on the fence, that today's session is helpful in your decision-making process and that you come out of it strongly considering electing CEP for next year. Before I move on, I did just want to mention that over the past 3 years, we've piloted CEP in 10 states in the District of Columbia before we made it available everywhere at the start of school year 14-15. So there are a number of states that have already been at this for a few years, and they've done very well with CEP, in addition to being trailblazers with the whole process of working out the allocations for other education funding. Like I mentioned on the last slide, we've had fantastic success in implementing CEP during this first year of nationwide implementation. As of December, CEP was operating in almost 14,000 schools in over 2,000 school districts. And to give you a sense of the reach that CEP has achieved in such a short period of time, I can also tell you that CEP schools can be found in 49 states in the District of Columbia, and that we are providing free school meals every day to up to 6.4 million children. We also know that CEP works in school districts of any size and with a wide variety of characteristics. For example, 2/3 of the 75 school districts that we identified as the largest by enrollment and most eligible for CEP are implementing on some level this year, either district-wide or for a portion of their schools. But on the other side of that coin, about half of the LEAs electing CEP this year have an enrollment of less than 500. So I think the numbers alone speak to how far we've come so quickly and how also that fast progress is already benefiting needy children in all parts of our country. And with that, we will now transition to the in-depth portion of today's session. As I mentioned previously, there are other important federal programs that distribute funds and services to high-poverty schools and that have traditionally relied on school meal application data to assist in the allocation of resources. And since CEP effectively eliminates free and reduced price data as we know it, we have in turn worked very hard to make adjustments and provide state and local agencies with options to ensure that the flow of funds and services to high-needs children are not disrupted. Extensive interagency communication and collaboration have resulted in a series of comprehensive guidance documents and other resources that are intended to assist state and local agencies to successfully and seamlessly implement CEP along with both the Title I and E-rate programs, which of course represent the two major federal funding streams that were most affected by the arrival of CEP. And there's nobody better to explain that guidance than the experts who administer both of those programs. And so that's why we have those folks here today to share with you some helpful information on how CEP can work in concert with other forms of federal aid. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and hand things over to our presenters from the Department of Education, Dr. Monique Chisholm, who is the director of that department's Office of State Support, and Todd Stevenson, who is a program analyst in the same office. Please take it away.
Thanks, Kevin, and thanks everyone for joining us this afternoon. As Kevin mentioned, this is a very important topic of conversation, and I'd like to echo what he said, that the benefits of this program definitely outweigh any of the growing pains that one might experience. As Kevin mentioned, I'm Monique Chisholm. I'm the director of the Office of State Support here at the Department of Education, which administers Title I. We want to say thank you, first off, to the Department of Agriculture for their collaboration in general, and on CEP specifically for the opportunity for my team and also Ed staff to participate in this webinar and also other outreach efforts. The purpose of our time today is to highlight the major updates to the U.S. Department of Education's guidance on the Title I program and CEP. We released this guidance last month, so hopefully people have had an opportunity to take a look at it. If not, the link for the guidance is available on the PowerPoint slide. As many of you know, Title I's primary purpose is to ensure that all children have fair, equal, and significant opportunity to obtain a high-quality education. Because school districts and states often use school lunch data to help implement aspects of Title I, changes to the school lunch program, such as CEP, can affect Title I. In order for school districts and schools electing CEP to carry out Title I as effectively or potentially even more effectively than before, the U.S. Department of Education released comprehensive guidance on Title I and CEP in January of 2014. We have now expanded this guidance, and I'm happy to introduce Todd Stevenson of my staff, who is going to take over and talk about the updates that are included.
Thank you very much, Monique, and good to be with everyone today and to have a chance to talk about the updates to this guidance, as we want folks to know what's that the new guidance, the updated guidance is out, and what the major changes are, so that hopefully you can continue to use it as a tool to implement Title I as you plan for the coming year. The first update that would like to highlight is to question 18, which is a question about the distribution of Title I funds within a school district. And as folks who are familiar with this guidance know that in the January 2014 guidance, we identified two methods that a school district could use, both equally consistent with the requirements for distributing funds. One would be to, for CEP schools, use the number of students identified through direct certification multiplied by 1.6 to determine the school's poverty percentage for Title I within district allocations. For non-CEP schools, would be to continue to determine that percentage the same way as before. And these are districts using school lunch data, where in the non-CEP school it would be number of students in poverty be the number identified through direct certification plus students captured through a household application. The third approach that the updated guidance adds is builds on the second approaches in the January 2014 guidance, which is to just use the direct certification counts for all schools in a district, regardless of whether they're CEP or not, just the direct certification counts. That was the second approach and remains a second approach in the current guidance. The additional approach is to add a version of that where the district would use the direct certification counts for all schools, regardless of whether they're CEP, and then multiply that number by 1.6. So, under the school lunch measure, the guidance provides, in that question, 3 approaches that a district may use. The second major update that we'd like to flag is new question 23A. And folks will remember in the January 2014 guidance, Ed recognized that there may be some instances where a school district with CEP schools may want to conduct its own survey to collect what would have been the equivalent of free and reduced price lunch data, including for within district Title I allocations, if it felt based on its particular case that it would get more accurate poverty data through those means. Subsequent to that, the question about if a district does do that, under what circumstances could Title I pay for that local survey? And so would refer you to the new question 23A that describes the circumstances where Title I funds could be used to pay for a survey to identify students from low-income families. And as outlined in that question, a district would need to be able to show that this particular use is supplemental, and second, that the costs are reasonable and necessary. And the question goes into some details around the thinking on those considerations. One thing we would want to note in terms of it being supplemental, that it's been shared with us by states and school districts that in some cases there are non-federal requirements for a district to have individual student poverty data. In other words, a district would have to, that the CEP, to meet these non-federal purposes, would have to have some kind of survey or some way of getting the data in the absence of Title I. And under those cases, it would not be supplemental to use Title I funds to pay for something that a district would have to have for other reasons, such as a state funding formula, for example. The next area I'd like to highlight relates to Title I services to eligible private school students. And the January 2014 guidance included questions on this topic. We've revamped questions 28 and 29 and added a new question 29A, which we don't think substantively changes what was in the January 2014 guidance, but we hope explains things in a clear manner in terms of the considerations that a district would need to take into account as it discusses equitable services with private school officials, including the measure that the district is going to use to determine the amount of Title I funds that have been generated for equitable services. And just as some background, it's the school district's responsibility to identify that method after it has consultation with private school officials, and meaningful consultation, which means that the issue's been discussed and that this includes the district taking into consideration the point of view of the private school officials before it determines that method. And in those questions, we identify that the available methods, what the available methods are, and those are laid out, and that that several considerations that the district will need to take into account. And so the way this section we've reorganized is question 28. It focuses on a situation where a private school does not participate in CEP, and the school district does. New question 29A addresses situations where a private school does participate in CEP as well as a school district does. And so would really strongly encourage folks to read these revised questions carefully, particularly those folks in districts that are involved with consultation and planning the services to private school officials, as well as folks at the state level and from private schools whose students receive Title I services. The final area to highlight is towards the end and update to question 31. And this question, or this update to question 31, only pertains to the 10 states that use school lunch data, at least in part, to determine the amount of Title I funds that school districts with under 20,000 total population, the amount of funds that they receive. Generally, the amount of Title I funds the school district receives is not affected by CEP because those allocations in general are determined based on census poverty data, which do not factor in the school lunch or school lunch data of any form, including CEP. However, there is a provision, a Title I statute, that permits a state to use different poverty data to determine the final amounts that districts with under 20,000 population, the final amount of funds that they'll receive, as long as those data are approved by the U.S. Department of Education. And there's 10 states right now that take advantage of that and use school lunch data, which now includes CEP data, at least in part, to do that. And so the additions to question 31 give a couple of approaches that a state could use to conduct those, determine the final allocations using the alternative data. I think in looking at that, note that the approaches are similar to the within district allocation descriptions in question 18. So those are, to recap, in terms of trying to see what's new in this March 2015 version compared to the January 2014. Question 18, within district allocations. Question 23A, using Title I funds to pay for local surveys. The equitable services section has been rewritten, and we hope is clear information for districts and private school officials and states. And then finally, the addition to question 31 that I just mentioned. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Todd. We will now hear from Erica Myers, who is a senior attorney advisor with the Federal Communications Commission. She works in the Telecommunications Access Policy Division at that agency, and she is going to talk to us about FCC CEP guidance. Erica, you've got the floor.
Good afternoon. I bring you greetings from the Federal Communications Commission, and the purpose today is to do outreach regarding changes to the E-rate program and how CEP is going to marry with those changes. In 2014, the Commission began modernizing the E-rate program. The Commission released 2 rulemakings in July and December of 2014. These changes were to focus the E-rate program to support broadband technology. We hope that this will enable schools and libraries to provide state-of-the-art learning tools and educational experiences for students and library patrons. The Commission also increased the cap from approximately $2.4 billion to $3.9 billion. In the first modernization order, we adopted changes to the E-rate program that we believe will allow CEP participating schools to seamlessly participate in the E-rate program. Discounts for the E-rate program are calculated using NSLP participation. All schools in the school district get the same discount. Single schools within a district never get their own discount rate, even though they are the only schools receiving that service. So that is a departure from the previous program. Because we have adopted district-wide calculations, when a single school applies for the E-rate program, they will not have their own individual discount rate, but they will have the same discount rate as the district. Urban-rural status for a school or school district is based on all of the schools in the district. Consortia calculate their discounts based on the simple average of their consortia members. However, all consortia members now are listed at their district-wide discount rate, even if only some schools in the district participate in the consortia. Under CEP, all students eat free, but this does not mean that they are counted as eligible for E-rate purposes. We must still determine the eligibility percentage of the school. So one of the points that we have is that schools will apply the national multiplier, which currently is 1.6, to the directly certified population, and this will in turn provide your NSLP eligible population for the purposes of the E-rate program. Schools are capped at 100%, so when you take your national multiplier and you multiply that times your direct cert population, it can't be in excess of 100% of your total student population. And I have some examples that I go through. I have a single school example and a district-wide example to help you see how this is applied. Schools that are part of a CEP group will use their shared group direct certification percentage times the 1.6 multiplier for each school in that group. And again, that's capped at the 100%. So here's my single school example. We're going to, for a single school, you would identify the student population for your school. You'd identify the CEP eligible population for the school. You'd multiply the CEP eligible population for the school times the national multiplier, which would get you the number of eligible students. You'd calculate the percentage of eligible students not to exceed the student population. Then you would determine the urban-rural status of the district and look up the discount rate in the discount matrix. So again, a single school actually would not be calculating their NSLP for just their single school, but when you fill out our form, Form 471, you do have to list out the schools, and so for those CEP schools, this is how they'll do their single school calculation, and then you would add up all the schools in the district, which is going to come next. So for the single school example, the school population is 1,000 students. 50% are directly certified, which is 500 students. You multiply this times the 1.6 multiplier, which gets you your 800 students eligible for NSLP, i.e. 80% of the students are eligible. This is the discount matrix 75 to 100% of the students would get you a 90% discount rate for Category 1 services and 85% for Category 2 services. School district example. So you'd calculate the student population for each school using the method that I explained just now, and then you'll calculate the NSLP eligible population for each school. Again, if you have a CEP school, you'll use that single school example, and then you'll sum the NSLP eligible population for the entire school district. You'll sum the student population for the entire school district, calculate the percentage of eligible students in the district, determine the urban-rural status of the district, and then look that up in the discount matrix. And we provide a tool when you upload your information into the system. It will allow you to. It will provide. You'll provide a spreadsheet of all your schools, and you'll load that template into the Form 471, and it will help you calculate this. So it's not a cumbersome process if you have not partaken in that process for 2015. If you're holding off till 2016, you'll see that it's not cumbersome. One of the things that we're also undergoing is we're moving all of our forms to online forms for the upcoming funding year, 2016. So that process will begin July 1st with schools filing their Form 470s, and then once they've competitively bid their services and accepted their proposal, they would then fill out their Form 471 to order their services, and that's where you would put in this NSLP information. We work very closely with members of CECA, which is our State E-Rate Coordinators Association, to ensure that this process will be seamless for participants, because we don't want CEP to your participation in CEP and that lack of source data that has been previously discussed to deter you from continuing to participate in the E-Rate program. One of the things that I think you'll see is that we've tried to make it so that if your CEP number changes, then that's the CEP number that you'll use for our purposes. If your CEP number stays the same, you'll remain the same. And this makes it so that should there be an audit or any type of review, the school official would just provide the same information that you provide to USDA for our purposes as well. I've also provided some contact information if you have questions with the forms. If you have questions with the process in any way, you can contact USAC, which is the administrator of the E-Rate program, or you can send questions to me via my email, which is here, and we will field those questions and provide you the necessary information to help you, because, again, one of the things we want this to be is seamless. We don't want schools that are already participating in E-Rate to feel like it's a daunting process. And if you're new to the process, we do have a lot of webinars posted on USAC's website and a lot of tools to help new participants. And again, I want to reassure you that CEP participation should not be an impediment to E-Rate participation.
Thanks so much for that, Erica. This slide also has some contact information for me, Kevin Maskornik, and also a link to USDA's CEP website that has all of our CEP guidance and resources. So if you have not already visited there or not a regular visitor, I would encourage you to take a look. That concludes the formal part of our presentation. At this point, we'll transition over to some